Congratulations, MAGA. You wanted tariffs and you got them.
Walmart just gave the middle finger to the United States of America. Well, technically, I feel like they gave the middle finger to President Donald Trump, but we, the citizens of the United States of America.
God, I am so tired of all these mainstream think pieces.
Walmart, the largest private employer in the U.S. with over 1.6 million American workers and more than 700 stores nationwide, is raising prices and shifting sourcing overseas in response to newly reinstated tariffs of up to 30%. CEO Doug McMillon confirmed the move during a May 15th earnings call, stating the company can no longer absorb the cost increases triggered by President Trump's revived trade war.
We will do our best to keep our prices as low as possible. But given the magnitude of the tariffs, even at the reduced levels announced this week, we aren't able to absorb all the pressure given the reality of narrow retail margins. We're positioned to manage the cost pressure from tariffs as well or better than anyone. But even at the reduced levels, the higher tariffs will result in higher prices.
For millions of American households relying on Walmart's low prices, this marks the beginning of a broader economic shift, one where loyalty to Made in America is no longer sustainable under current policy. The price hikes at Walmart aren't just a business decision. They're the result of a tipping point. For a company built on aggressive cost control, razor-thin profit margins, and dominance through scale, the sudden imposition of elevated import tariffs was a blow to its operational core. Shifting more sourcing abroad wasn't an ideological choice. It was a financial necessity. Walmart's product lineup, especially in categories like consumer electronics apparel and household goods, relies heavily on complex global supply chains. Many of these goods are sourced from China, Vietnam, and other low-cost manufacturing hubs. When tariffs of up to 30% were reintroduced in April 2025, those costs didn't simply disappear. They were absorbed partially by Walmart in the short term. But over time, that buffer eroded. As CEO Doug McMillon told analysts, "We can't absorb these increases indefinitely. Our model depends on affordability, and affordability depends on predictability." That predictability vanished when tariff policy shifted almost overnight. A move that was intended as a negotiating tactic in a revived trade strategy quickly became a destabilizing force across the retail sector. Smaller retailers had less room to maneuver, but even a giant like Walmart, with its negotiating leverage and economies of scale, reached its limits. Faced with the choice between protecting margins or maintaining domestic sourcing, Walmart made the call most public companies eventually make: protect the business. Now the ripple effects are showing. Distribution networks are quietly being restructured. Suppliers in Arkansas, Ohio, and the Carolinas are seeing a decline in orders, while new contracts are being opened in Mexico and Southeast Asia. Shipping lanes are shifting. Internal procurement systems are being retooled. These aren't headlines, but they're real, and they reflect a deeper corporate pivot that's already underway. At the same time, Walmart is accelerating automation across its domestic operations. Over 2,000 stores are set to expand or install self-checkout systems by the end of 2025. That shift isn't just about convenience. It's about trimming labor costs in an environment where other operating expenses are rising rapidly. The quiet truth: every percentage point of tariff pressure increases the incentive to reduce payroll. Meanwhile, consumers, especially in working-class communities, are beginning to notice changes. Prices on staple goods are creeping upward. Inventory is tighter. Rollback discounts are less frequent. And in some rural towns, hiring freezes and hour cuts have started to surface. Walmart is still there, but its footprint is changing: leaner, more automated, and increasingly reliant on offshore inputs. All of this began not with a market failure, but with a policy decision. The idea that tariffs could be wielded as leverage to bring back domestic manufacturing is not new. But in practice, that strategy has often produced the opposite effect, raising costs for importers, squeezing retailers, and incentivizing companies to move operations offshore just to survive. Walmart's shift is not an act of betrayal. It's a signal, one that should be impossible to ignore. As Walmart quietly restructures its global supply chain, the political response in Washington has been anything but united or prepared. While some lawmakers express concern about the retail giant's strategic shift, others double down on the very policies that triggered it. The message from the executive branch, particularly from President Trump and his allies, remains combative. Don't raise prices and don't move production. But the ground reality offers no such easy trade-offs. The most visible reaction came not in a policy reversal, but in a public rebuke. President Trump, speaking on his Truth Social platform just days after Walmart's warning, insisted the company should eat the tariffs, suggesting it had a patriotic obligation to absorb the costs rather than passing them to American consumers. The statement, lacking any operational or financial nuance, underscores the growing gap between political rhetoric and business reality. Behind the scenes, lawmakers are split. On Capitol Hill, divisions are deepening, not just between parties, but within them. A recent budget bill that included $880 billion in spending cuts over 10 years, primarily targeting social safety nets and regulatory agencies branded by Trump allies as fiscally responsible and economically nationalist, failed to gain full support even within the Republican Party. Multiple GOP members broke ranks, citing concerns that the bill didn't meaningfully address structural trade challenges or inflationary pressure caused by tariffs. They were right to worry by attempting to pair austerity with protectionism, the policy risks undermining both economic stability and political support. Walmart's retreat from American sourcing is being treated in Washington as a PR issue, not a structural one. But in doing so, policymakers risk missing the real story. When the largest retailer in the U.S. starts shifting capital away from domestic supply chains, it signals not disloyalty, but a system that is no longer functioning competitively. Even some officials at the U.S. Trade Representative's office, speaking on background, have admitted concerns that the long-term effects of the revived tariff structure may be harder to unwind than anticipated. The temporary 30% duties now look increasingly permanent in the eyes of manufacturers and retailers alike. And once a supply chain is rebuilt abroad, it rarely returns home without major incentives. The consequences of Walmart's shift are not theoretical. In small towns and suburban communities across America, the cracks are already forming. Local suppliers, particularly in the Southeast and Midwest, are reporting reduced order volumes. Trucking companies contracted to Walmart are seeing fewer shipments and more idle time. Independent growers and regional distributors who once had long-term relationships with the company are facing renegotiated contracts or outright termination. On the consumer side, price increases are no longer subtle. While inflation overall has moderated in 2025, Walmart's core categories, groceries, household goods, apparel, have seen retail price hikes between 6% and 12% in just the last quarter, according to industry trackers. For families living paycheck to paycheck, that's not a minor inconvenience. It's a significant cut into real income. Labor, too, is feeling the pinch. Walmart's move toward automation may be efficient, but it also means fewer cashiers, fewer warehouse staff, and fewer local jobs. In towns where the company is the single largest employer, that's not just a business decision, it's a community-level disruption. And unlike past economic transitions, this one is happening quietly, without a major layoff event or factory closure just slowly vanishing opportunities. While Walmart has the scale and capital to navigate global supply chain restructuring, most small and mid-sized U.S. retailers do not. These businesses lack the negotiating power to soften tariff shocks. And unlike Walmart, they can't simply shift production to Mexico or Vietnam. What's unfolding is a two-speed economy, one in which big players globalize to survive while smaller companies are left to absorb rising input costs with fewer tools, tighter cash flows, and far less leverage. According to a 2025 NFIB National Federation of Independent Business survey, over 60% of small business owners report that tariffs have directly raised their cost of goods, but only 15% say they've been able to pass those costs on to customers without losing sales. The result? Shrinking margins, frozen hiring, and in some cases, early closures. If Walmart, the most equipped to adapt, is already signaling stress, small businesses are likely experiencing something closer to quiet collapse. And unlike Walmart, they don't get press coverage, they just disappear. The irony in all this is that the very policy meant to strengthen American manufacturing tariffs may be hastening its decline. Tariffs raise costs for importers, which theoretically should benefit domestic producers. But in reality, many U.S. base manufacturers still rely on global inputs, parts, raw materials, components. When those inputs get taxed, the whole production chain suffers. The Make in America strategy presumes a self-contained industrial ecosystem that no longer exists. The modern supply chain is global by design. Punishing one link, even with patriotic intent, can weaken the entire structure. Walmart's decision isn't anti-American, it's anti-uncertainty. And it signals what every executive is now thinking, but few are saying aloud: economic nationalism, unless extremely precise, can end up cannibalizing the very system it's meant to protect. Walmart's response to tariffs is not unique, it's just the most visible. and that visibility matters. If a company with the scale, capital, and political access of Walmart can't make America first work under current trade policies, then who can? This isn't about loyalty. It's not even about globalization. It's about what happens when economic policy prioritizes messaging over mechanics and when businesses are left to navigate uncertainty without clarity or partnership. In the end, Walmart didn't start this shift. It just adapted to survive it. And if we're honest, that should worry us more than any political soundbite.